Hello and welcome to the InDetail YouTube channel brought to you by Foundation for Commerce and Culture Interchange, where we try to bring in updates and analysis from India that matters your business. We are so excited to see the kind of acceptance we received for our first episode of InDetail YouTube channel. And I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each one of you for your support. We are also thankful to you for the feedback, comments, and suggestions that we received. And the topic that we're going to cover in this episode of InDetail YouTube channel is based on one such suggestion that we received to give an overview of the employable workforce in India, the education system which caters to it, the various categorization of the workforces in India, as well as the HR practices related to it. To discuss on this topic, we had with us Ms. Suman Shankar from Cerebrus Consultant, who has more than 20 years of experience in this field. So with this introduction, let us move to the video and listen to Ms. Suman Shankar. To begin with, like as we know in any typical company, we normally call the workers as employees. But there are different sections. So broadly, we categorize it into the white collar and the blue collar. So would you, to begin with, throw some light on how the classification happens in India and what is the general, perception on it?
Thank you so much, Premjit. So what I will do is I will first delve into the education system in India before I try and answer this question. So in India, the schooling comprises of 10 plus 2 years. When we say 10 years of schooling, it includes 5 years of primary education, 3 years of middle school education, and 2 years of high school education. So after the 10 years of schooling, it is followed by 2 years of secondary, or what we call, say, in Karnataka or even in Maharashtra as the junior college. Right? So after this 10 plus 2 years of schooling, the normal practice is to either go in for 3 years of diploma or graduation in engineering or science or arts and so on, or in some cases they go in for 4 years of graduation in engineering or science and so on. So given this background, you will see that when we talk about the blue collar or the white collar, now, so you're right. So typically blue collar or workmen, they are in a very conventional way classified based on skills. And these skills are, broadly what we call as skilled workmen, semi-skilled workmen, and unskilled workmen. And, a rough meaning of, the level of skill is, for example, a skilled workman is able to operate on the machine independently and able to produce the output as per specifications. A semi-skilled is someone who is training to operate the machine, but is still unable to do so independently. And an unskilled is someone who is like a helper, who is, bringing the tools and, overseeing the machine in the absence of the operator. Now, when we talk about these skills, and also, with the advent of CNC machines that you see both in the auto sector and in the electronic sector, you will also see that, there are jobs like setting the CNC machine and so on, which can be classified as skilled or highly skilled. Now, if I were to look at the skill hierarchy for the workmen, the blue collar, and I just spoke to you about the education system, you will see that typically the unskilled workmen are those who have completed the primary education, which is like, I would say 5 years of schooling. Those who are semi-skilled have probably completed their high school, which is like 10 years of schooling. And when we look at skilled workmen, they have either completed the 10 plus 2 years of schooling, or in some cases, what happens after 10 years, they actually join an industrial training institute where they are certified in a few trades. It could be, say, probably electrical or welding or instrumentation. So these skilled people are either the 10 plus 2 or they are these ITIs, who normally fall into the skilled category. And like I said to you, there are workers who operate on the CNC machines. So these are typically skilled workmen like ITI with several years of experience. Or in some companies today, they also hire the diploma engineers. Like I was saying before, after the 10 plus 2 years, they undergo a 3-year diploma course in engineering. So they are the people who normally support in these high skilled areas. However, if I were to look at the white column, which is the staff or the management category, you will see that the start point is always the diploma or the graduate, that is those who have completed 3 years after their 10 plus 2 is really the start point. And at some, certain stage in the hierarchy, you also see the graduate engineers who've done their 4 years of engineering or science course after their 10 plus 2 who come into the workforce.
After their studies, once they get employed in a company, another situation typically falls in is the kind of hierarchy. Like there are certain terms which are universally used. For example, like CEO, CTO, COO kind of. But then again, like there are confusing terms, especially for a foreign company which works in India. Like there could be a president, there could be a chairman, there could be a CMD. So not just from the management white collar side, but even on the other side. So how does a typical hierarchy in a company or an office setup works?
So first, I want to clarify that typically the hierarchy for the workmen and the hierarchy for the staff or management categories is separate. So for the workmen, it is largely dependent on what kind of skills are actually on the roles of the company. So as I was explaining to you, we have, say, unskilled to skilled or highly skilled. You will see that organizations that typically have these complete range of skills on their roles typically tend to have more grades, could be, say 5 or 6 grades to accommodate. One is the skill and the other is also their tenure in the organization, going up to even 7 to 8 grades. But some of the newer organizations, they tend to keep only the skilled employees on their roles. In those cases, you will see that the number of grades is less, could be probably 2 to 4 grades, so that you're able to accommodate their tenure in the organization. And some of the newer, even more newer organizations, are trying to move away from having a sort of hierarchy for the workmen, and they just call them by designations like a associate or a team member and so on. And they are trying to sort of have a flatter. When it comes to the staff or the management, you're right that, grading is a very important, the grade structure is extremely important. Now, the number of grades depends on not only the size of the organization, but on the philosophy of the company. Whether they want to have tall grades, whether they want to have flatter grades. So it is largely a function of that. But whichever way you see, you will see that on an average, organizations have anywhere between 9 to 12 grades. And when I say this, I'm starting from, like I said to you, the entry-level staff grade, where it's usually a diploma or a graduate who starts their career in the organization. And you will see that the reason why we have more grades in organizations is because grade is one of the methods through which the employee aspiration is managed. Because especially with India having a large workforce of younger age group, it is important that they perceive that they are growing in the organization. So there is a growth that is given to them. They see themselves growing every 2 to 3 years in the hierarchy of the organization. And the other point that you just spoke about, yes, designation also is another means through which the employee aspirations are actually managed by the Indian organizations.
With these many grades, in the blue collar sector as well as in the white collar segment, I think a big challenge for the HR of that company would be in terms of structuring the compensation and benefits. So I think the categorization would also be on the basis of the structure of salary. So how could you throw some light on typically how the salary structure is being developed or ideated in a company, and how's it been frequently looked at in terms of increment and other benefits?
Again, I must highlight here that the approaches are very different for the workman category and for the staff and management categories. So, the workman category is largely governed by, the minimum wages that is prescribed by, each of the states. Besides, all organizations get into tenured settlements between the employee groups and the organization. And these settlements are usually for a period of 3 to 4 years. And so that is what it is when it comes to workmen. Now, when it comes to the staff or the management grades, you will see that, because their compensation is largely divided into, there is a fixed portion of compensation, and then there is a variable portion of compensation. Now, the fixed portion of compensation is usually reviewed on an annual basis. And of course, if you see the last 2 years, that is pre-COVID, you will see that the increases have been single digit because, the sectors have faced some challenges even before COVID itself. So therefore, you will see that, in 2018 and 19, the increases have been single digit. And of course, as you know, this year, that is in 2020, many organizations have not provided for any increases. And not just that, they also went ahead with salary reductions, and in many cases, variable pay was frozen. Of course, since then, many organizations have reinstated the salary cuts, and also because they have seen a rebound in their performance the last 2 quarters, some amount of variable pay has also been paid out by these organizations. Now, like I said to you, because the compensation has the fixed and the variable part, so you will see that variable pay is, quite prominent in the manufacturing companies. And many manufacturing companies pay out variable pay. And I must say that it must be, when we talk about junior level, junior management, to senior management or top management, it will be anywhere between 5 to 15% to a max of about 20% of compensation across levels. But like I said earlier, the payouts have been much lower. And in fact, several of them have frozen the payouts in the year 2020.
Taking it further, throw some light on the functional differentiation in compensation in a typical Indian perspective.
When we speak about manufacturing companies, Premjit, it is they usually have a standard approach to grades and salaries. And therefore, we have not observed too much of a functional differentiation, across levels and so on. But yes, because there have been some functions where we have seen demand supply gap and the need to have, newer skills, especially in areas such as new product development or supply chain, or even ERP like SAP skills and so on. We have seen that there is a premium that has been given to employees in those functions. And also with coming in of digitization, automation, because these skills have not existed so far, and these are really sort of in high demand kind of skills in the market. So the premiums have been far higher for these kinds of skills in the market today.
Going forward, what would you think like the future, in future, the HR practices or HR practitioners have to look at in terms of any regulatory or any legal climate that they can probably be careful about? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that perhaps what may be pertinent to bring up here is the the new labor codes that are coming in. And in fact, because we dealt on the topic of compensation and benefits, so probably I will speak about that. Now, the new, the new wage code regulation was passed in the year 2019. And, soon after that, 3 new labor codes, which is the Industrial Relations Code, the Occupational Health and Safety Code, and the Social Security Code. These are therefore totally the 4 new labor codes that have been passed. And what we are thinking is that it is going to bring in a sea of change, especially in the manufacturing sector. And some of the highlights of the code is that, one is it is going to impact the the industrial relations, because it is bringing in, a new model of employment. And it is also trying to bring in some sort of, I must say, in terms of the employer-employee relationship, some new regulations that have come in. Also, it brings in, it has an impact on the compensation levels, the how the compensation structure is defined, and also in terms of the benefits and so on. And the biggest change that you will see because of these new labor codes is that now whether it is corporate, whether it is organized, unorganized, now it covers most of the working population under its ambit. And a lot of codes have actually been simplified in this. And the multiple laws that we have actually been consolidated into these 4 codes. And therefore, I must say that, see, each code is pretty detailed. And, it talks about, for example, the wage code talks about the definition of wages in terms of the payment of wages, the minimum bonus that needs to be paid. The industrial relations talks about the industrial climate. It talks about the employee relationship, and also in terms of, bringing in fixed term employees for the first time. The occupational code talks about what are the basic bare minimums that the organization needs to have in terms of facilities and benefits in the organization. And the Social Security Code is trying to bring in, drawing more emphasis on the social security practices, including bringing in the gig workers into its gamut. So these are some changes that the new codes are trying to bring in. And while these have been passed in the parliament, in terms of the implementation, it has been deferred for the moment. And we are just, sort of awaiting more information in terms of when the government would, want the organizations to start enforcing it. So that is still awaited as we speak.
So I think you have wonderfully given an explanation in terms of how the HR practices, like from the various kinds of employees, and how the compensations are being fixed, and then some of the difficulties that typically an HR faces in terms of dealing with their employees. And I should thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule and being part of this interaction. And we will try to explain this to the Taiwanese companies who look at opening their offices in India and employing Indian employees in their organization. It will definitely be a good input for them to consider. Thank you so much on behalf of Foundation for Commerce and Cultural Interchange. Thank you, Suman.
Thank you so much, Premjit, for giving us this opportunity.
So that was a brief overview of some of the HR aspects that might be useful for companies who look at hiring India talents. On the sidelines, let me also inform you that the Foundation for Commerce and Culture Interchange organizes career seminar that facilitates the Taiwanese companies who look at employing India talents at various portfolios and various levels. Those who are interested to have more details about this can always reach back to us. We also request your valuable feedback and comments about this video, and also your suggestion for new topics which you wish we cover through this channel. So until we meet again in another episode with a new topic, it's me, Premjit Krishnan, on behalf of Foundation for Commerce and Culture Interchange, bidding goodbye.